In the morning, first thing I do is mantras as the sun's rising. They're just mantras that are based on compassion and loving kindness for all sentient beings. It takes you out of a focus on yourself and a focus on to everyone else. After the mantras, I'll spend anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour and a half just in quiet meditation. And then I usually go for a bike ride or take my dog for a walk or go for a swim and get some physical activity in. And, that's taking care of my mind, my body, and my spirit. And once I've got those three things in place, the day just unfolds beautifully.
Hi, Trinn. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Mark. It's wonderful to be here.
Thank you for being on Peak Performance Perspective, where we help entrepreneurs master health, wealth, and relationships. Now, as an entrepreneur yourself, the founder, CEO of Jampha Tibetan Pharmacy, what does peak performance mean to you?
Peak performance. Well, it used to mean physical performance. And in this journey that I've been on, I've learned that the mind, the body, and the spirit are very inseparable in wanting to be our best selves and put our best foot forward. And so peak performance really is, for me, means having my mind and my heart in coherence, where I'm living and listening to my heart's intelligence rather than getting rattled by all the thoughts that run through our minds all day long, and having the energy to support my peak performance into a flow state that isn't stopping and starting, but a continuous flow state. And when I hit that stride, that's usually when my best work gets done. And so it's taken a long time for me to come to a realization, but in my experience, when you bring those three elements, the mind, the body, and the spirit, into your performance focus, beautiful and amazing things start to happen, and we start to open up gifts that we didn't even know we had.
Now, before becoming an entrepreneur, you were in the military.
No, I wasn't in the military. I was a security contractor. So
you were a security contractor, that's it. So what core values did you inherit from that type of an upbringing, but also faith-based upbringing that you had?
Yeah, my mom raised me. She's very strict and kept us in an alignment spiritually, as well as with our academic studies and physical health. I was brought up in a home that was very faith-based, but also had a lot of respect and history within military culture. My grandfather's role in the military, my mom, my father was. And so that was very much part of just what was ingrained into my being, wanting to be of service, wanting to help others, wanting to protect people that couldn't protect themselves. That was something that came second nature to me and really what led me down that path.
Everybody has a never again story where they do something saying, never again am I doing again. Or they have a story where they hit rock bottom. What was yours?
Mine was hitting rock bottom for sure. At the time when I was working as a security contractor, I owned my own security company. I was on a very different path, protecting very high level people, foreign royalty. During that time, I was assaulted and broke my leg and almost had to have it amputated. The break was that severe. They ended up agreeing to perform a surgery to try to keep my leg. And they applied external fixation, which are big rods sticking out of your leg, and they keep you in a bed for months just to be able to keep it. But they told me that I'd be in pain and probably on disability for the rest of my life, but I didn't want to lose my leg. And so I did what they told me not to do. I kept my leg and ended up in a really bad state for about 5 years. I was on 17 medications every day, given a prognosis of PTSD and unable to work. And so I was just in a rut I couldn't get myself out of. And that's really when I hit rock bottom. I hit a point where I didn't want to live like that anymore. And I asked the universe, God, a higher power, whatever you want to call it, for help, and just basically humbled myself to the point where I couldn't do it by myself and I needed help. And asking for that help, it came, and it came quickly. That's what really led me onto my path of natural medicine, getting myself off of all of the pharmaceutical medications and being able to come back to work and now run multiple companies.
What did that brutal assault on you teach you about vulnerability and surrender?
It taught me that everything can change in an instant. Before that, I'd never broken a bone. I was always the big tough guy, the strong guy, and I thought I was infallible. I was unbreakable. And that one moment completely shattered that false idea about myself and made me really start to see things as, nothing's set in stone, nothing lasts forever. Everything changes. That's the one constant, is everything changes. And we need to be able to adapt to that change. And it took me a long time to be able to adapt to this change. The benefits of it have been being able to help my family members and loved ones, and now other people as we express what we've learned in medicine, able to be a catalyst for other people who maybe didn't have any hope, didn't see any light at the end of the tunnel, and now all of a sudden there's an alternative, and an alternative that works.
What was the hardest part about coming off these 17 different medications?
The hardest part was probably the opiate medications, taking the painkillers. That was the hardest part. It took me I used CBD at the time to modulate the pain and help me to get off them. That was really difficult and took me about 12 months to come off completely. And the next would probably have been the blood pressure medications. I'd been taking those for about 10 years. And every time I tried to come off, my blood pressure would go way up. And those two things were the hardest for me to address by myself. Using cannabinoids and terpenes, I was able to create products that address the symptoms, just like taking a medication would. But I had to keep taking them. And I didn't want to be in a revolving door, and I didn't want to create another revolving door healing science. I wanted something that helped people get onto the path of healing where they could continue with the right lifestyle choices and diet and meditation and things like that. And I wasn't able to find that myself, but was eventually brought into Tibetan medicine. A Tibetan physician and pharmacology master found us, our company, and saw what we were doing with terpenes, which are considered the life force energy of plants, the constituents of plants that give them the vast majority of their healing potential. And in recognizing what we were doing with terpenes, he brought in his wisdom and knowledge from a 2,500-year lineage of medicine that he holds called Suwa Rigpa, and more than 50 years of clinical and formulation experience. And so what has now become Jampha Tibetan Pharmacy that we've co-created together is an expression of that 2,500-year lineage of Tibetan medicine, and also of his 50 years of work here in the US, adapting these formulas for Western physiologies for our body types.
What was the core desire to get off of these medication in the first place? There's so many people who get diagnosed with things who are on blood pressure medication for the rest of their life. So what was your core reason to do that?
I just didn't want to live. It was either I fix it and address it and work towards becoming better, or I give up. That's really the point that I was at. And at that time in my life, my mother had gone through 3 brain surgeries. She died on the table. She'd been brought back after a few minutes. She lost most of her motor cognitive functions, completely lost most of her vision. And my dad was supporting her as well as supporting me and paying my medical bills and her exorbitant hundreds of thousands of dollars of operations. I felt like a huge strain on our family. But I didn't want to be taking away from my mother's care with my dad having to take care of me. I felt like a burden. And it was really that feeling that led me into that hole of despair. And when I prayed and asked for help, I was always taught, if you're going to ask for something, give something. And so I said, show me a path to healing. And I got nothing better to do with the rest of my life. I've been sitting on a couch for 5 years. I'll use that energy and that healing to go and share it with others, whoever wants to listen. And I meant it. And I think that I really believe that was a catalyzing factor in making all of this possible. It was within 2 weeks that everything started to unfold.
Obviously, plant medicine had a huge role in your physical recovery. What role did it play in your emotional healing?
A huge role, because nothing I'd ever found supported my emotional healing, even since being a child. It wasn't until about 2 years into working with our Tibetan physician that a situation came up where I was doing consultations with sometimes a dozen people in a day. And a lot of the people who come to us have been told by their support teams that there's not much more that can be done for their condition. And so they come to us looking for something outside of the box. Many times they're terminal and they are sharing with you really deep, painful experiences. And I try to have an open heart when I'm talking with people and be compassionate and loving. And when you do that, sometimes you take on those emotions and those traumas and they become stuck in the neural network of your heart. And that was affecting my heart. It started to palpitate. I started to have actual physical sensations during these experiences. And I went to our Tibetan physician and told him what was happening, a little alarmed. And he explained to me that we needed to create something to support my heart for being able to communicate with people on that empathic level, but not taking any of that on board. It was foreign to me and new to me, the whole concept, but I listened and I used that formula after we created it for about 3 months, and all of my PTSD issues just dissolved. The triggers for it became things that I laugh at, no longer triggers. I was able to see things from a completely flipped perspective that was positive, not negative, and even positive, not even neutral. And so what Healing Heart actually did was help me to release and dissolve all of those traumas and emotions that get stuck within this neural network of our heart without having to relive the experiences like you would sitting with a psychologist and unpacking those experiences with somebody that you're working with to talk about it. So for me, the Tibetan aspect of healing that's been the most profound has been the spiritual side and the emotional side. Because what I found in my search for healing was there's a lot of stuff out there that's focused on the mind and the body, but not really anything that I found with integrity that was actually supporting the spiritual aspect of healing. And so Tibetan medicine and Ayurvedic medicine were the first that have come along and the only that have come along that have really expressed that in a way that I felt should have been part of the expression of real, true, and pure medicine. Mother Nature has an answer for every imbalance. And there are places on this planet that have kept that information in treasuries of wisdom and knowledge for a long time so that us now can benefit from it.
What makes terpenes the most powerful, or more powerful than what people realize?
Yeah, terpenes are like, if you think about a plant like the military, terpenes are like the special forces. That's like the Navy SEALs. And these Navy SEALs, you can send them to blow up a bridge or you can send them to rescue a group of people. They have vast plethora of skill sets that can be intertwined and synergized within that group to fulfill any purpose, to move and flow like water through any obstacle. And so these terpenes help to greatly increase the healing potential of the dried botanicals. When a plant is dried before it's prepared into a herbal preparation, as it's being dried, the terpenes evaporate and they're released and they're no longer present in the botanicals. When you reintroduce those terpenes, you're essentially reintroducing the life force energy of that plant like it was still living with all of the medical benefits of the actual botanical. Now you've greatly enhanced and synergized the healing potential of those herbs. And so this is the spiritual aspect that's been missing from plant medicine for a long time because it's been removed just by the process of us creating the medicine. But now, thanks to the hemp and cannabis industries, there are huge amounts of isolation going on with terpenes. We can find a very high quality, organic, clean, isolated terpenes that we can then bring back together and create with 8 or 10 or 12 or 15 terpenes, a synergistic entourage that supports the botanical expression of the medicine into your body. In a nutshell, terpenes are helping with cellular communication, the way that our body communicates within itself, really enhancing and supporting that. And so there's a very small amount of terpenes that go into these formulas, but the big things come in small packages. You don't need much. Another way that we can look at terpenes to help people understand them is when you have a hand, we'll call this the spirit, and then you have a glove, and that's the plant. The hand goes into the glove, you can do a lot more than an empty glove sitting there with nothing to animate it. And so terpenes become an animating factor of the botanical entourage that speak directly to our body's biochemistry, and our biochemistry speaks directly to the terpenes. So it's a two-way communication. And what this does is it stops us from having any kinds of contradictions or side effects or interactions with other substances because the body intelligently can take what it needs and leave what it doesn't.
You spoke about performance optimization when talking about peak performance. How is that different in a world that now all of a sudden glorifies hustle?
Yeah, it's pretty. People push themselves to the limit and they want more to push themselves more to even a higher limit. But in my experience, there's a better way to do it. And that's becoming smarter, working smarter, not working harder. There's things that we can do when we support our minds and our hearts into a point of coherence that are far beyond what we can do with our minds just by ourselves. In my experience, spending an hour in the morning, 4 a.m., getting my mind and my heart into a coherent state means I can get twice as much done during the day. It just works out that way. It's preparing yourself so that you can have that peak performance rather than just trying to push the limits on everything and push yourself that little bit further. You're giving yourself the support to be able to push yourself in that way if needed, but also opening up this expansion of mind and consciousness and focus and attention and establishing a flow state. I'm sure you know what I mean by flow state. You start writing a paper or a contract and it's 12 hours later and all of a sudden you did a week's worth of work and you're like, I've been putting all that off. I didn't want to do any of that for a long time. And all of a sudden it's just voila, it's there. That's where the money is for me. That's the sweet spot. That's where I want to keep myself present at all times in every moment. It is in that flow state because then things just happen. We don't have to do anything. We just become an observer and aware of what's happening and we let things play out. And it takes so much of the anxiety and the angst out of life.
How do you think entrepreneurs listening to this should think differently about recovery and resilience?
I work with a lot of executives and CEOs, corporate people, doctors, and what I find is many of them need some mineral support because they're working at such high levels. They're using up a lot more. And with that mineral support and cognitive support, you can level up your brain's performance and ability to stay in those flow states. One thing I found that's really interesting in the last 3 or 4 months is when we include our heart formula, which is called Healing Heart, into that, it starts to open up a new dimension of awareness and a new way of doing things for these executives that have been entrained into their systems and protocols for doing things for a long time. And the reason for that is because they're starting to, instead of filter through all of these thoughts to find the right direction. They're listening to their intuitive, innate wisdom that comes from your heart, from our heart's intelligence. And anybody that's invented something that's changed the world, anybody that's come up with something that nobody else did, they've entered that state because this is a portal of wisdom where we can receive information beyond what we've received and taken in physically ourselves here on this earth. There's a field of information, the quantum field, that can be tapped into. And when we have the support and the understanding of how to do that, it opens up all kinds of opportunities for us to really do things beyond what we even thought were possible.
Having worked with people at such high levels, doctors, engineers, leaders, why do you think most people stay stuck in pain, even when there are tools available?
A lot of people feel that like they deserve it on a subconscious level. I find they've done things that they haven't forgiven themselves for, or been a part of situations, and they feel like somehow their pain or their physical ailments are penitence for things that have happened in their life. Many of them unjustified, not their fault at all. And that's again where that healing heart formula comes in, is when you resolve and dissolve those traumas, emotions, angers, whatever you want to call them, it opens space. And what fills that space is now your choice. And so when you're in a receptive and an open heart state and you want to fill that space with positive things, you're equipping yourself with more skills and more awareness to be able to do more. And what fills those gaps can be pretty profound sometimes.
So, going through your own experience, how did the ancient Tibetan wisdom transform your understanding of illness?
My understanding of illness was you did something bad with your body or environment, or ate something, you got sick and you needed to heal it physically. I had no understanding of any of the emotional or spiritual aspects of healing because it's never talked about in Western medicine. And I didn't even know that they were the obstacles that I needed to overcome to finally get to the point of healing that I wanted to. The Eastern medicine philosophies are far more advanced in the spiritual aspect of healing. There's differences, obviously, between the different lineages, but I found within the Tibetan lineage the most pure expression of that. It's never been commercialized or monetized, which is, I think, what's kept it largely very pure. And so this is the first time, really, when Tibetan medicine has been expressed and shared with the world. And it's a time when we need it the most, where our medical system has let us down in so many different areas and people are searching for alternatives, but they want safe alternatives. They want alternatives that are proven by science and by time. And you find all of those things within Sowa Rigpa, Tibetan medicine.
You mentioned a little bit ago about mineral medicine. What is mineral medicine and why is it often overlooked by Westerners?
Your body's made of minerals. And so if you don't have the minerals that your body needs to regenerate or restore a certain part of the body, then it can't do the work. And so a lot of what I find in people who are in regenerative or restorative protocols, what's blocking it from being effective in the way that they want is the mineral balance in their body. And so there's a very profound mineral supplement that comes from the Himalayas. It's called Shilajit. It's very profound. It's used in Ayurvedic, Eastern, or Chinese medicine, as well as Tibetan medicine. But it contains upwards of 90 minerals, as well as fulvic and humic acid. And these minerals have been accumulated over sometimes 16,000 years in the Himalayas, from all of the minerals in the Himalayas. And it ends up becoming a black asphaltum that that proliferates at high altitude where the sun bakes onto the cliffs. And so when you harvest it and purify it, it becomes one of the most amazing mineral supplements that will probably ever be available on the planet. When you take that, it gives your body the ability to regenerate and restore in a way like I've never seen with anything else. I had cartilage missing in my leg, big chunks of bone missing, screws holding other parts together. Was told I could never lift more than 30 pounds again, never work out again using free weights. And I lift 300 pounds yesterday, no problem at all. That Shilajit is what gave my bones and my ligaments and my tendons and my sinews the mineral support to be able to regenerate and restore. That I never found anywhere in Western medicine. You take different supplements, glucosamine, chondroitin, all the rest of it, but none of it was touching what actually needed to be done, which was regeneration in the joints. And so Shilajit becomes a masterful regenerative restorative support, and it's also a super longevity and energy elixir. It's described as a destroyer of weakness and conqueror of mountains. So for a high-functioning, fast-moving executive, that would probably be if I was only choosing one, that would be the formula that I would choose to support them.
In your personal journey, you went from a protector to a patient due to a brutal assault. What advice would you give men who are struggling with vulnerability or all of a sudden identification as a man?
Yeah, things get confusing out there. But like I said, when you live from that heart's intelligence, all of that clutter, all of that noise, it dissolves because you're living from a pure expression of your soul, not from what your thoughts are telling you are, or not from what your mind's being invaded with media and movies and music and all the rest of it, and you're being programmed with. You're living from your true original blueprint program, which is your heart's intelligence. And when you do that, all that other stuff just becomes, it just dissolves and becomes quieter and quieter until you're at a point where you're sitting in the pond and there's no ripples. And that's the point of Zen and awareness that really allows you to create so much more effectively from it.
How do you go about defining true strength now?
True strength. I think true strength really is defined by our connection. We're taught to use our mind, analytical. That's what's drummed into us. But we have a heart just like a woman does. It has intuition just like a woman does, just as a woman has a mind with an intellect. And so when we balance and find the balance point between the two of those, that's really where we find our peace. I would say that I've gone through this with my own family, with the whole gender thing and what's a man, what's a woman, all the rest of it. When we're living from our true authenticity, labels don't matter so much as the way that we express ourselves and show up in the world. And so for me, it's sticking to my morals, to my beliefs, but also being inclusive and non-judgmental of other people's choices. And in that state, things move more fluidly.
What has your relationship with fear become as a result of all of this? Because you went through a humongous transformation in your own life. For entrepreneurs who are listening, who are afraid of taking a step or sometimes even afraid of themselves, how would you help them evaluate their relationship to fear?
The more it scares you, the more you should really look into it. Because the things that you fear the most are usually where the most growth can be found. I didn't want to start a company when I first started this. I had a family member that said, you just got yourself off 70 medications and back to work. Share it with the world, make a company. And I said, I don't want to do that. I was coming out of being on disability for a long time. I had to find the belief in myself to be able to even do this. How am I going to go out and create something that's going to help people heal? I healed myself, but I don't know how to do that for the rest of the world. And those are all of the constant barrages of thoughts that are coming into our mind, trying to dissuade us from our path, which is here. And there's been a lot of fear that's come along as we've gone through this process, but I always rise through it with the awareness that the universe answered when I called, and the universe doesn't answer in half measures. And so having trust that the path that I foresaw and was committed to would eventually lead me to my destination, that's what really got me through the difficult parts.
How do you go about distinguishing intuition from a trauma response?
Good question. A trauma response is usually accompanying negative emotions, not positive emotions. When you live from intuition, there's a joyful lightness that comes with the expression of your heart's intelligence and your heart's wisdom. It feels good. There's no resistance there. When there's resistance, oftentimes it's because the ego is trying to fabricate something with the thoughts to manipulate what's being expressed from the heart. And it takes practice to know the difference between the two. But for me, learning the difference between those two voices has been meditation. It doesn't take long, a few minutes a day, just sitting, open awareness with your own thoughts and your own heart, and you making the decision of where it's coming from, where's the motivation coming from, where's the inspiration or information coming from. And as you start to identify, you start to learn the frequencies of each of those conversations and know exactly where it's coming from. And then it becomes easy to navigate.
You mentioned this a little bit ago about waking up early in the morning and having certain practices. Can you explain a little bit more about the type of spiritual disciplines and daily practices you do so that you remain grounded?
Yeah, in the morning, first thing I do is mantras as the sun's rising. They're just mantras that are based on compassion and loving kindness for all sentient beings. It takes you out of a focus on yourself and a focus on to everyone else. After the mantras, I'll spend anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour and a half just in quiet meditation. And then I usually go for a bike ride or take my dog for a walk or go for a swim and get some physical activity in. And, that's taking care of my mind, my body, and my spirit. And once I've got those three things in place, the day just unfolds beautifully. And even if it's not unfolding beautifully, I'm in a state where, come what may, I'm going to stay peaceful and engaged and aware.
What is a lesson that you learned from Amchi to get to 10 that reshaped your worldview?
Man, that's really hard to answer because there's been thousands of things. I think just understanding how much energy influences healing and health. He's really had a basic understanding of it and experienced it myself, but I didn't realize how much influence energy in a pure state can actually have for somebody else's healing. You talk about masters that have walked the earth that have healed people. How did they heal people? Just by saying something, it's by their words, by the way that they're expressing themselves, and the alignment of those words with the quantum field, bringing that manifestation of miracle or whatever they're trying to perform into life. I think that one of the most beautiful things that he has actually taught me is that love is the fabric that connects us all. It's the very fabric of creation. Every religion, and you get it down to its brass tacks, love is the motivating factor. And I grew up with a Christian background. This is a Buddhist Tibetan science. And so I wanted to learn and understand the spiritual aspects of it. And I spent the last 5 years learning it. And what that brought me to was just an awareness that all paths lead to the same way, and just different expressions.
You could wave a magic wand and solve one global health problem. What would it be?
It would be people's hearts, supporting people's hearts so that they can see clearly who they are and what they are. We have so much stuff that gets stacked onto our perceptions of who we are and what we are from the time we're born. Most of it's a bunch of crap. When you dissolve all that and let it go and really get to the truth of your being and who and what you are, that becomes the most powerful foundation to build from, at least in my own experience. And so my advice to people would be is find that path into your own inner knowing, your own inner wisdom, your own temple within your own heart. Start listening to the information and guidance that's constantly flowing and projecting from that space. We're just not tuned in and listening to it.
Would you say that's the legacy that you want to have for Jampha, or where do you see it 10 years from now?
Yeah, the legacy is as an alternative healing pharmacy modality for the world, not just for America, but for anybody that's looking for an alternative that's effective, that's safe. We want to provide that opportunity for them. And our goal really is to continue building and providing a service that's not a revolving door. Our biggest challenge as a business is finding more people to sell to, because once we get them onto a protocol and into a healing trajectory, they don't need to take our medicines for the rest of their life. And so they're no longer a customer. But what happens is they have a healing experience, then they share it with their friends and their loved ones, and 5 more people will come. So that's really how our business has flowered and bloomed, is word of mouth and people having experiences and then sharing it within their groups and their networks, and more opportunities becoming available. But we would really like to help dissolve the barriers and the barricades that separate us as people in the world. We want to remind people that love and kindness are the things that connect us all, and that when we focus on that, we can dissolve the barriers of religion and race and gender and all the things that seek to separate us. And when we do that, we realize that we're all part of the same whole. And we really, when we're supporting and helping and loving others, we're only supporting and helping and loving ourselves.
Talking about all the things that you've gone through in your life in the past, if you could go back to that version of yourself when you were struggling the most, what advice would you give yourself?
I've been asked this before, and it's real simple. The same advice I just gave everybody else. Get out of your head and get into your heart. If it's coming from your head, challenge it, question it. If it's coming from your heart, listen to it, engage it, spend time with it, let it sink in. As a young man, I had that connection with my heart, but I didn't always listen to it because my mind thought I knew better. My thoughts told me I knew better, and I went off in different directions. But the same information and lessons that I was taught as a young man that I didn't listen to, I've had to come back and relearn later in life. But I acknowledge and see that information was always available to me. I just wasn't in a receptive state to receive it. I tell myself, listen to your heart.
And what do you think that version of you is the most proud of when he sees this version of you today?
Probably just that I've taken down all my armor. I was in protection for a long time, and I was the big, strong, tough guy, and that was my personality and who I was. And as I've healed myself, I've let go of that persona and really come into a much truer and pure expression of my own being, which means I'm a lot happier, a lot more joy in my life. You're not trying to be 2 different things. You're set in expressing yourself the way that you are, rather than the way you think other people perceive you to be or perceive you that you should be, but really living true to yourself.
Tell us more about Jampha. Tell us more about you. Where can people connect with you?
Yeah, Jampha, our website is spelled jampha.com. You'll find all of our products there, a vast library of information on Tibetan medicine and healing, different blogs, press releases, as well as our traditional Tibetan pill medicines. For those who are interested in learning more, don't really know where to start, we offer free consultations, and that page to sign up for that is heal.me. www.mindfulness.com/Jampha, Jampha. It's a 15-minute consultation over Zoom. We'll listen to what you're trying to support with your health and then create a protocol based on the information that you give us that will support you in healing, regenerating. We can be reached by our 1-800 number, which is 1-888-303-3378. We're available from 6 a.m. until 10 p.m. every day. If we don't answer, we'll respond usually within a few hours. And if you'd like to email directly and ask questions, you can email me at trinn@jampha.com.
Entrepreneurship is a lonely journey. And there are so many times when we feel broken and we feel that there is no way out. I think your life and your story is a testament that there is always a way out as long as we have the tools available to us and we're open to trying new things. So thank you for being on the show, Trinn. It was an honor and a pleasure having you. And I hope to talk to you soon again.
Thank you for having me, Mark. Wonderful. Take care.